Okay, so what I'm going to sort of do is put everything together from what we talked about with my colleagues Brian and Joyce and with Julie. Julie has sort of, whether or not she knows it, sort of served as a mentor to me for many years, and she was a big part of the inspiration for why I wanted to start Empire State Humane Voters. We're sort of going to talk a lot about how we're going to take what Julie has in her book and actually putting it into place here in New York City. So as a lot of you guys, I'm sure, probably know, I previously worked for NIFAA for the past 5 years in the Carriage Horse campaign, and as you can imagine, that was quite a, I guess I'll say, a good learning experience. I certainly had an opportunity to learn a lot of the things that do work and a lot of things that don't work. And throughout my time there, it was really an opportunity to also kind of see the holes in the animal rights movement and see what we really needed to do to catch up with other issue areas out there who are pretty far ahead of us in terms of their organizing and their success. That's not to be negative, it's just I want to put it in perspective for you guys that, you know, just about every movement out there has a C4 organization or a PAC and makes political organizing and voting blocks a standard part of their advocacy. Animal rights is one of the only issue areas out there where we don't do that as a standard, and that's what absolutely has to change. We don't yet make it a part of our everyday thinking as advocates to put ourselves and embed it into the fabric of local political institutions. And we're going to talk today a lot about how we can fix that and how you guys can all start doing that in your advocacy. You know, in the last 10 to 15 years, there's been a lot of efforts to organize politically in the city, and they have had varying degrees to success. The last 4 years have definitely been certainly revolutionary, you know, since the 2013 mayor's race, and that it was really the first time that we saw the power of what happens when you organize and you mobilize humane voters, in that we saw an animal rights issue become one of the top issues in the New York City mayor's race, which is a race that's watched by everybody in the country. You know, and who would have thought that horses would have become this big deal? And that wasn't by accident. That was because for the first time, we all as a community, we got organized and we got to the polls, and we made it an issue because we were doing endorsements like Julie was talking about. But we didn't quite get to the depth that we needed in terms of organizing as a community. There's still some holes that we needed to fill in, and I think that that's why we haven't seen as much of an advancement as we were hoping since 2013. Right now, without Empire State Humane Voters, there really isn't a grassroots, multi-issue political organization that's focusing on animal protection, that's working to make sure that our community continues to grow, to recruit, and to remain, most importantly, sustainable and a permanent fixture on the New York City political scene. And one of the things that we're going to want to focus on is making sure that we can show to lawmakers that we weren't just a passing fad in 2013, that we're actually here to stay and that we're growing as we do that. There's certainly more people than ever before that identify as animal advocates. We have more vegans, more vegetarians, more people who consider animals when they go to shop, whether it's for food or for clothing. More and more people in history than ever before recognize and agree that animals should be treated with kindness. But we aren't seeing a proportionate amount of success as public opinion changes. So public opinion has gone way up in terms of the number of people who agree, of course, it's a no-brainer, we should have laws to protect animals. But what we're gonna talk about is why isn't that translating into getting those sentiments that we have for animals into law? And the reason is because we really need to ramp up our political organizing and our voting block for animals. Okay, next slide. Okay, so like I said, we are building political power for animals. Also, just want to recognize our board, Christine Mott, Sharon, who's right next to me, and Dana Capone, if you want to just raise your hands. They're members of the New York City Bar Association's Animal Law Committee, and I'm very grateful to them for being brave enough to take on creating this new organization. Also, my contact info is on the lower right-hand corner if you ever want to reach out. Okay, next slide. Our mission, you can hit all three of them, is to elect candidates who support animal protection, lobby for stronger laws to stop animal cruelty, and hold elected officials accountable to humane voters. Next slide. Okay, why we are different from a charity, and I know that Julie, you talked about this a little bit. ESHV is going to be able to take on the work that, say, HSUS or ASPCA or PETA cannot take on in New York City, because we're going to be a C4 political organization. So we're going to be sort of serving as a central clearinghouse for candidates that run for office that are going to earn our paw of approval. The steps that you take to doing that are, first you want to do a scorecard. A scorecard is different from an endorsement. A scorecard is what we use to look at people who are currently in office. So we look at their voting records. We look at whether or not they voted for or against a proposal, whether or not they co-sponsored it, and we then broadcast that to everybody in our community, and we let our elected officials know that certain issues are what we call scorecard issues. So for instance, with the circus, we let them know, hey, we're watching you on this. This is something that's going to become part of our publications that we send out to everybody in the community. It sort of puts the elected officials on alert. There's nobody doing this right now at the local level, and it's something that has to start happening, or elected officials are going to be able to just hide, behind their votes and have no punishment or consequences to what they do in voting against animal issues. As they say, sunlight is the best infectant. The way that a legislator scores on a scorecard can affect who we will endorse or oppose, of course. Let me see. Okay. I'm just trying to, I don't want to go over everything that Julie already did, so I'm sort of skipping around a bit. I apologize.
It's new to most people in the room.
Oh, okay. Okay. So, why ESHV is also different. We are going to be taking the approach that's not just taking lobbying, we're putting together lobbying and endorsements. When you put those two together, you're much more likely to get your law passed. If you go to a elected official and try to push them on something, and they don't see that there's any real electoral push behind it, they don't really have any reason to support it. Okay, also, we are going to be working on supporting elected officials when they need it most. One of the things that we see happening in our state legislature and in our city council is elected officials don't really go to bat for us because they don't have a reason to. Doing something because it's right isn't motivation for them, because that doesn't get them votes on election day. And there's a lot of fear among electeds that if they vote a certain way for an animal protection bill, that there won't be any protection for them on election day themselves. By having a C4 organization, we can guarantee that elected official that when it comes close to election day, we are going to be there for them. So an organization like, say, HSUS, if they convince the state, a bunch of state senators to vote for an anti-trapping bill, that's awesome. But if there is no organization that can then mobilize animal voters to actually get the vote out and vote for those elected officials after they take that vote in support of the anti-trapping bill, they could be out of office. And then it sends the message to electeds that if they support animal bills, they can be voted out. So you absolutely have to have some sort of a political organization in place in order to provide that kind of coverage for elected officials who do the right thing. Okay. One example of that is, Joyce, you're going to kill me, but the circus. So as you guys know, in the City Council, we have a bill, Intro 1233, which would ban the use of exotic animals in the circus. It was introduced last July. We had a hearing in October, but it hasn't really gone anywhere. It's kind of languished. And a lot of folks, doesn't really make sense to them. You know, public opinion overwhelmingly supports ending the use of animals in the circus. We had a very successful hearing, and wrangling no longer exists. So why is it that elected officials are not jumping to sign on to this piece of legislation? The reason they're not jumping to sign on to it is because they haven't yet seen that we have the political structure in place to provide them coverage, right? They need to have an incentive. It's not enough to do the right thing. They have to know that there's an organization that's going to back them up when they take that vote, that's going to essentially end, you know, an entire industry from coming to New York City again. So thankfully, that's why we started ESHV, so that we can give those elected officials that confidence that when they take a vote that's controversial, or even one that's not that controversial, that they're going to have a community that backs them up. Okay. Oh, next one. Okay. Actually, can you go back one? Sure. Okay. Our 501c4 tax status. In my opinion, donating to a 501c4 is the best investment that you can make for animals. It isn't tax deductible, and that's because we engage in, we have higher thresholds for how much time and money we can spend on lobbying, and we're also allowed to endorse candidates. So just like when you give to a candidate, that donation isn't tax deductible, same thing when you give to a 501c4. The reason I believe that it is such a great investment to donate to a C4 is because these are organizations who are actually working to change the laws. If you are just sort of, you know, let's say animal shelters, if you are trying to solve pet homelessness, but you're just doing you know, spay-neuter programs and building bigger shelters, that's just putting a Band-Aid on it. It's not gonna end, you know, the use of puppy mills. It's not gonna end the consistent supply of homeless pets unless you actually change the laws that are needed to crack down on those businesses. And to do that, you have to have the political force behind the push to get elected officials to sign on to that. Okay. So another way that ESHV is different is that we are an organization that is by the people for the animals, and we're smaller, and we're going to be driven by the issues that matter to you as the community. So we haven't yet decided what exactly we are going to be taking on. If you want to go to the next slide. Okay. So here are just a few examples of issues that are possibilities. If you have ideas for things that inspire you, things that you want to work on, email us at info@ESHV and let us know what animal protection issues are important to you. I want to go to the next one. Okay. Sorry, which slide number is that? Actually, don't worry about it. Okay, so Julie has talked a little bit about, or she actually talked a lot about recruitment. So I don't want to repeat too much of that, but essentially we have to sort of think differently about what it means to be an animal rights advocate. And like Julie said, that means we have to focus every day on recruitment. And I can't stress enough that we should always carry around voter reg forms. I have them here, we have them at the front desk. And you should also always be carrying around sign-up forms. We have ones at the front desk over there as well. I have some here. Keep them in your purse or your backpack or whatever. get people to fill them out, because that's exactly how we fill our base, and how we grow our movement, and how we show elected officials that we are constantly expanding. Other ways that you can do recruitment, of course, are tabling. I love tabling. You can pretty much do it anywhere in New York City as long as you're not blocking a sidewalk or blocking the entrance to a store. You literally just take any old plastic table that you have, stick it out on a corner or in front of your apartment building, and get everyone to sign up. A great way to do tabling is to do so at a location where the local elected official is likely to walk by. So if you can figure out where the elected official takes the subway every day, that's a really good spot. You can imagine the look on their face when they get ready to go to work and they're about to go down the stairs to the subway and they see a bunch of animal rights advocates, with a table that's stationed right outside the L train or whatever, asking people to sign up. It has an incredibly powerful effect. That's why I very much agree with Julie that I think recruitment needs to be done on the ground rather than online. Online is good at getting lots of people in bulk, but I think you need to supplement it with in-person, on-the-ground recruitment so that the local community and the elected officials can actually see you on the ground and see your presence and see you becoming a staple and a part of that community. Okay, we will also be having district captains similar to HSUS, only these district captains, of course, are going to be working a lot on electoral stuff. So they're going to be working on get out the vote, IDing voters, working with candidates, etc. We're also going to be doing many more trainings on civic engagement because we all believe that this is something that is pretty new to the animal rights community, and we need to continue to spread this message around to more advocates so that everybody in this room can also sort of start to play teach the teacher and teach their fellow advocates why they need to get politically active for animals. And eventually, we will start running our own candidates for office. And if anybody wants to run for office, let me know, because I'll help you. Okay. You want to go to the next one? Okay, so this is basically just a sample recruitment sheet. It's very simple. You can see that it just says along the top, yes, I support having good state and local laws to protect animals from suffering and abuse, and I will vote for candidates who work to protect animals. You want to keep your recruitment sheet sort of as simple as possible. I wouldn't suggest having a recruitment sheet that says things like, yes, I pledge to only vote for vegan candidates. Like, that's probably not going to get many people to sign up. You want to keep it as broad as possible. In order to grow your voting block as quickly as possible, you want to be open to anybody who cares about animals. Yes, there's going to be people who sign up for your organization who have a rescue dog but go eat steak at night. But the point is it doesn't matter what their personal conviction is. That's still somebody who is a vote, who's willing to vote for humane candidates and is going to be a part of building your movement. And also, of course, the benefit of bringing everybody into your organization is even if their personal philosophies don't line up exactly with you, as they become more and more of a part of your organization, that's when you can hopefully start to change their behaviors themselves. Okay, you want to go to the next slide? All right, so elections in New York City. These were two races where these were examples of elections where animal rights advocates actually had an effect on the outcome. Donovan Richards ran for Queens City Council in early 2013. I believe it was like a 3 or 4 way special election, and he won by only 79 votes. And that was one where animal advocates did an endorsement process. We went out and got his support early, knocked on doors, and he ended up winning. Paul Vallone was another one where he ran against a candidate who was supported by the Teamsters. And of course, his support of animal issues ended up paying off, and he won by just 144 votes. Okay. So this year is going to be a very, very important year for everyone to get politically active. That we have 51 city council seats that are open. 51 is the total number of seats in the city council. Of those, there are 7 that are open seats, meaning there's going to be a completely new person that's going to be elected. Everybody else is an incumbent. So that means that we have 7 opportunities to fill those seats with animal-friendly people. It's 7 opportunities to increase our hold in the city council. For instance, Rosie Mendez, Melissa Mark Viverito, Annabelle Palma. Those are 3 incredibly animal-friendly legislators. We have to keep those. There's no excuse. We absolutely have to keep those. Dan Gorodnik, Jimmy Vaca, Darlene Mealy, and Vinnie Gentili, they're not so animal-friendly. So it's a huge opportunity for us to organize and talk to the candidates who are running for those seats and back somebody who's actually going to represent what matters to us and then hold them to it. We can go back. So we also are going to want to be involved in races where the incumbents have challengers. You know, we talked a little bit about how elected officials need to see that there is a benefit to them supporting us. So while there aren't too many competitive primaries for the incumbents, there's at least a few I can think of. For instance, Helen Rosenthal and Carlos Menchaca both have somewhat serious primaries. And they both have been very strong advocates for animal rights. This is a huge opportunity for us to show them that we're going to be there when we need them to be. You know, Helen especially totally went out on a limb for us. Even when the newspapers were completely hammering her on her support for banning horse-drawn carriages, she never wavered at all. And now that she has a primary challenger, it's going to be time for us to step up and help get out the vote for her to make sure that not only that she stays in office, but that it sends a message to other elected officials and other people running for office that when you do the right thing and listen to your constituency, we're going to work to protect you and make sure that you stay in place. Okay. We also want to make sure that we're involved in all of the races and not just the close ones, regardless of whether or not we can have an impact on the outcome of the race. You're still planting the seeds and growing the membership base of Humane voters in that electoral district. And we need to do that in order to sort of shift the political climate in each of these districts so that whoever is running, whether it's this year or next year, knows that they're always going to have to answer to animal issues when they run for office. Many of the candidates have never been approached by an animal protection organization. They've never had to answer a questionnaire. And so by sending out your questionnaire to every single candidate who's running, it's a huge opportunity to educate them on topics that they've never seen before. Even if the candidate doesn't win, they may run again next year. They may get hired to become a staffer for a politician. They may become a political appointee. By sending them the questionnaire and going through that process with them, we are increasing the likeliness that they're going to become more familiar with these issues and that in the future, they're going to be more likely to take us seriously on these. And last, questionnaires are incredibly important because there's no better time to get an elected official or a candidate to support your issue than right before an election when they really want your vote. It's a good time to actually get their commitment in on paper, and that way you have a document of record saying that they pledged to support something. So the way that relates to the circus is certainly with the council races coming up, we're going to be doing a questionnaire, and of course circus is going to be one of the big ones on there, so that way we can get them on record, and hopefully if the legislation doesn't go through this year, the next time around it'll be much easier to get that through because we'll actually have their commitments on paper. Okay, we'll go to the next one. Okay, just a few lobbying tips. Constituent calling is not enough. Just because they get a ton of calls on an issue, yes, that's a good thing, and you absolutely should still call, but again, we have to supplement all of our lobbying efforts with electoral strength, because the number of calls doesn't necessarily mean that that's the number of voters who are actually paying attention. When you talk to an elected official, one of the things that I like to do is sort of represent a crew that is bigger than yourself. So when you talk to an elected official, don't just say, hi, Councilmember Smith, my name is Jane Doe, and I want you to vote for wolves. You say, hey, my name is Jane Doe, and I represent all of the dog owners who live in the 700 block of Jefferson Avenue in Bed-Stuy. See what I did there? I created the perception that I'm representing more than just me who lives in my little house. I'm representing all the dog people who live in my block. You don't have to belong to an official dog club to say that, but you can sort of describe and put a picture in that elected official's head of the fact that you're going to go back to your district and report back to people in your neighborhood what that elected official said. May I count on your vote? This is one of the things that we hear all the time, and I think Julie might have touched on this. So I can't tell you how many times that, I'll hear from somebody that they'll say, oh, I met with Councilmember so-and-so, and yeah, they're definitely supportive of the circus. And I'll say, okay, well, what did they say? Did they say that they'll definitely vote for it? And they'll say, oh, well, they told me that they have a dog and they really, really love their dog and they ate at a vegetarian restaurant last week. And I'm like, okay, but did they tell you, yes, I'm going to vote on it? And they said, well, they told me that they really, really care about animals and they care about them so much that blah, blah, blah. Again, did they tell you, yes, I will vote for this? 9 out of 10 times, the answer is no, they didn't actually say that. The elected official just basically talked in circles about random words that have to do with animals in order to throw off the person. So anytime you talk to an elected official or to somebody running for office, make sure you ask them, may I count on your vote? It's okay to be direct, they're expecting it, and again, every other issue area that's out there is certainly gonna be asking their elected officials in the same way. Okay, next one. Okay, rethinking what it means to be an animal advocate. So, a lot of times I think we get sort of focused on the emotion of wanting to spread the word about compassion, right? In our community, we have a lot of people who already support this. So, of course you still want to work on getting other people to support our positions, to go vegan, etc. But you also want to think about balancing out your time beyond that. You want to start thinking like a political person, right? So what I suggest is read what your elected officials read. Subscribe to City and State's First Read. It's the local newsletter that gets sent around every morning, and it's a roundup of all the political news in the city. That is what your elected officials read. That's what your lobbyists read. That's what the talking heads on the news read. That's what the staffers read. And by doing that, you can sort of pick up on the gossip in City Hall. You can also figure out who the players are. Also, same thing with Gotham Gazette, which is very similar. Okay, so strategically, how you want to spend your time. Now, okay, some may disagree with this. Protesting, it is important, and I'm not saying don't go to protests. That's not at all what I mean. Go to protests, but when you're there, make sure you're using your time wisely. And like Julie said, if you're at a protest and there's 30 people there, get every single one of them to fill out your form to sign up for your political block. The other thing you have to keep in mind is that when you're protesting, you want to be thinking, is this the target that I'm really going for? So if you're protesting from the Barclays Center, right? Or let's say that Universal Circus is performing there, whatever circus is performing there. Who's the decision maker who can actually change whether or not that circus can come to the Barclays Center? Ringling is never gonna agree to do that because they make money off of it. So who can make that change? The city council can, right? They can change the law to make sure that they can't come back in the first place. So you have to think, is it better to be spending all of my time protesting and trying to get a few circus goers to turn around and go home? Or is my time better spent working on building a political bloc so that we can change the laws for these animals. So another way to think about it is, okay, we need Jimmy Vaca or Jimmy Van Bramer to support the circus bill. So maybe instead of protesting in front of the Barclays Center, we all go and gather a bunch of residents of Queens and we go do petitioning or voter registration right by Jimmy Van Bramer's home subway stop or by his office. And if you think about how that sort of putting together the building blocks towards getting a law passed, in the long run, it's going to be a much better use of your time rather than just protesting. Okay, next one, and then I promise I'll wrap up. Okay, also, in rethinking what it means to be an animal advocate, we have to branch out outside of our own community. We need to embed ourselves in the existing political structures. You can sort of think of politics as a clique with, lots of popular people. Find out who those people are and start showing up. For instance, join your local Democratic club. I highly recommend that. Your local elected officials, they go visit their Democratic clubs every single month. A Democratic club is the organizational structure that helps them get on the ballot every year because they help do petitioning for them. By going there, you have a chance to build a rapport with your local elected official, and they're going to start to see, hey, this person's really valuable to me because they come to the club every month, and eventually they're going to start helping to get them on the ballot. Going to fundraisers for candidates. I know that some people are like, well, why would I go give money to a candidate that I don't really know that much about? What I recommend is going to a very low dollar fundraiser. There are some where it costs just $10 to get in. And when you go in, you hand the candidate your check in one hand. In the other hand, you shake their hand, tell them your name, tell them what street you live on, and tell them why exactly you came to your fundraiser, what issue it is that matters to you. And they're very much going to pay much more attention to the constituent who came to their fundraiser and gave them